Hello everyone, it's Deborah from Attic Lane and I'm here with another 10 cards from one kit, and the kit is Simon Says Stamp Best Birthdays. So let's have a look and see what we get in the package this month. There's our inspiration sheet with lots of design ideas, and we have 5 different colours of card, and I will use those later on as my base cards. There are 3 tags, they have different apertures. There are 2 that are like little jars and 1 that is a flower, and then there are 2 inserts which we'll use to make shaker cards probably. There are some little, I think these are called sprinkles. They are quite thick stickers. I think they're acetate stickers. And then we have a selection of double-sided papers. You can see they're very brightly coloured. And the stamp is exclusive to Simon Says Stamp, and it's got lots of birthday greetings, hearts and rainbows. So I'm preparing my base cards. I'm going to cut each of those 5 sheets in half, and then I'm going to top fold them by scoring along through the middle. For our first stamp we're going to use the heart, and I'm using black Stays On ink because I'm going to stamp onto white shrink plastic. The Stays On black ink won't smudge, and I'm using Prismacolor pencils to colour in each of those little segments on the heart. And you can see I've coloured 4 hearts, and I'm going to cut each of those out. If you're new to shrink plastic, this is a great fun medium to use. You usually buy this in A4 sheets, and they're the plastic that's already been extruded and it's been stretched, and when you reheat it, it reverts back to its original size and shape, which is a lot thicker, as you can see from the heart that I'm using my heat tool to shrink, and I'm placing my stamp block on it just to make sure it flattens down nicely, and when all 4 are finished, that's what they look like. I'm using one of the tags as a template, and I've taken a piece of paper and I'm going to use that paper to cover up the front of my tag. So I'm also going to mark out where the jar is, and I'm going to cut that away just using my craft knife. So that piece is cut out and ready to go, and next I'm going to choose another piece of card to sit inside the tag. I like that pink. So I just need to cut out a little rectangle so that it will fit neatly inside the tag. And then I'm going to assemble it and glue everything together. I've glued the top right heart into position so it will remain static while the other 3 will move about when you shake the tag. And I want to make the neck of that mason jar look as if it's got a piece of twine around it. So I've got a piece of green twine here, and I'm going to glue 2 of these pieces in half. I'm going to cut it in half. I'm going to glue the 2 pieces on the inside of the tag, and when they're secure I'm going to pull the 2 pieces through to the front and then tie a knot in front of the jar. I think it will all become clear when you see me doing it. I've pulled the pieces through to the front so that they're out of the way when I begin to glue the insert in place, because the insert is sticky on one side but not on the other. So you can see the white piece of paper around the outside edge, that's the sticky piece. When I close the top piece of the tag onto the bottom piece of the tag, which has all been glued up, then the tag is nearly finished and I can just add my bow to the front of the jar. I've neatened my little bow and cut away the excess twine, and now I can look at how I want to mount this tag onto my base card. There was one of the sheets of paper in the kit that had these really useful strips with all kinds of different designs on them. Keep an eye on those hearts because they're going to pop up into another card later on. And I cut out all of these strips, and I decided that the one that I wanted to use was Happy Birthday. The tag was already quite colourful, there were lots of things going on, so I didn't want to make the rest of my card overcomplicated, which is why I kept it very simple and just glued that one little strip into position on the bottom of my base card. And then I just need to add my tag and it's complete. For card 2, I'm going to use the long sentiment that reads Happy Birthday repeatedly, and I'm going to use Versacolor Chateau Grey ink, and I'm going to stamp it up on a piece of white base card several times. I'm going to use this as my base card, and you can see how it will look when it's matted up. And I'm just going to go around the edges of the white card that I've inked over with the Chateau Grey again, just to give that a little definition and a small border. And I'm going to glue that onto my base card. So now I'm using one of my Cottage Cuts stitched rectangular dies. I'm going to use a couple of these actually. I found that the very smallest one is a perfect fit for the very small candle stamp. So I've cut out a very small frame, which is just big enough in the inside to take that candle. I've inked up the candle with Versacolour, and I'm going to use a glittery gold embossing powder to cover that over, and I'm going to heat set that. You can see it shimmering there. I now have a piece of acetate, and I'm going to glue this to the inside of my frame. I'm going over a black piece of card with my anti-static powder, and I'm going to white heat emboss the sentiment that reads, "Sending lots of colour your way." I've heat set my sentiment, and I've cut that piece of black card to size, and I'm just going to position it on my card and stick it in place. I'm going to use these sequins, and I will provide a link at the bottom of the video to tell you exactly which sequins it is that I've used, and they're going to go inside my little frame. I want them to cover the base of where the candle sits, but I don't want them to cover too much of that candle. And now I'm just removing some foam pad adhesive and gluing my frame into place over my candle. And my card is finished. For card 3, I'm using my Cottage Cuts rectangular die set, and I'm going to cut out a range of these on plain white card. Once these are cut out, I'm going to stack them on top of each other to create dimension on my card, and you'll see as we go through that I started with one base colour and I actually changed it. I'll show you that at the end, but let's go with what I'm doing here. So I've got a piece of pattern paper and I'm gluing it onto place on my base card, and I'm going to get my white layered rectangles and glue all of those on top of each other, and then you can see the dimension that that creates. Now there is a Frosting Yum sentiment underneath another block of print, and I just want that piece, so I'm actually cutting it off. It doesn't damage the rest of the stamp. The rest of the stamp is completely fine and completely usable, but I want to put that in the centre on the top of my card because I really want to highlight two of the acetate stickers. So I'm going to take, one is ice cream and one is frosted tea cake, and I'm going to stick those right in centre place on my card. However, having done that, I decided that that was too much white and I needed to break it up a little bit, and I also actually didn't like the pink as the base card, so I changed it, and this is what I did. And you can see I added another piece of paper just to break up that block of white. For card 4, I'm using masking tape, and I'm going to put it right across the centre, and I'm going to focus on the candle stamp. So you can see I have a range of colours there. I went with sort of rainbow colours, and I'm just going to stamp just on the edge of that masking tape all the way along my card, both top and bottom. When I peel off the masking tape, you can see that all of those candles just hover above a central place. I've already stamped and heat embossed with white embossing powder my sentiment. I've gone with happy birthday repeatedly onto a piece of black card, and I'm going to position that in the middle of my design. It hangs out a little bit at the end, and I'm just going to chop that piece off. And now I'm preparing a couple of thin pieces of paper taken from the paper stash, which I want to go top and bottom of the card. So when I'm happy with the position, I will glue those in place. I'm using my glue pen because it's a nice fine nib and I can control the flow of glue best. And when I cut off the edges, my card is complete. For card 5, I'm cutting off a selection of strips, all 1/4 of an inch wide. I'm using 2 or 3 of the different papers. Now you can see I'm using a pink base card, and I'm going to glue all of those pieces of strips of paper that I've cut onto my card. Those strips slightly overhang the top of my card, so I'm just going to use my scissors to trim those off. I've prepared a black strip of card, and I've white heat embossed the sentiment, sending lots of colour your way, and I'm going to glue that onto the base of my card. I'm just cutting a little fishtail on the right hand side edge. Once I'm happy with the shape of my black card, I'm going to take a piece of foam tape and I'm going to apply it to the back, because that will add a little bit of dimension to my card. And then I'm going to select the ice cream cone that you can see on the sticker set, and I'm just going to glue that into place on my black piece of card. Now I'm going to take some of the little bright dots from the sticker set and stick them onto the black card as well. And with that, my card is finished. So for card 6, I've cut out a rectangle from a piece of white base card. I've also used this die set from My Favourite Things to cut out a couple of hills, and I will link to that die set below the video. And I'm going to position my hills inside the frame of my card. I'm going to glue those into place, and then I'll trim off the ends. I've stamped out several clouds and I've cut them out. I want to give myself plenty of options. I didn't know how many clouds I would want to fill this space, but in the end I decided on 3. And as you can see, I'm going to glue those into place, 2 on the corners of my card and 1 in the centre. I'm going to use the rainbow from the sticker set, and I'm going to stick that onto the front of my card. Now these are sticky stickers, obviously, because that's what stickers are, but to prevent that sticking on the inside of my card, I'm going to use my anti-static powder just to go over the back of that and reduce the stickiness of it. I want the inside of my card to look pretty and neat, and so I'm going to use the front of the card as a template, and I'm going to draw around that, and then I will cut it out and glue it into place on the reverse of my card. And you can see that that will just make everything nice and neat. There's no raw edges. I'm adding glue to the inside of my card, and I'm going to glue in place that piece of blue turquoisey card. This is one of the cards that I was going to use as a top folding card, but in the end I cut it down because I thought it would make a beautiful backdrop for this scene. I'm also taking one of the cloud stickers. It's got a little smile on it, and I'm putting it up there with the rest of my clouds. To complete my card, I'm going to use one of the sentiments from the stamp set, which reads, "Happy birthday to the kindest, most beautiful person I know." I'm going to use my stamp positioning tool, and I'm going to use pink Versacolor ink. And with that, my card is finished. On to card 7, and I'm going to use my shrink plastic again. So I'm taking the heart stamp, and I'm going to use my black StazOn ink and stamp out 4 images, and then I'm going to colour them in with my Versacolor pencils, and I'm going to cut each of them out. I'm using my crocodile, and I'm going to cut a hole using the larger of the 2 settings, and I'm going to position that in the middle of the heart. When I shrink these down using my heat tool, you'll see that the hole also shrinks. That's why I'm using the larger size. Again, I'm using my stamp block just to flatten out my hearts, and there they all are. I'm using a piece of pink base card, and I'm going over it with my anti-static powder because I'm going to use VersaFine black archival ink to ink up the image which reads "Happy Birthday," and I'm going to stamp that into position. I'm going to cover my image with black embossing powder and then heat set it. I've threaded a needle with some black thread, and I'm going to poke a little hole into the base of my sentiment, and I'm going to rest on my pincushion so that I don't damage my mat underneath. So I'm now going to work on the reverse of my card, and I'm going to thread through the little hole, and I'm going to secure that thread in place on the reverse with a small piece of tape. Now I'm going to thread the thread through the front of my heart, and you can see now why I made the hole in advance. And I'm going to repeat that 3 more times, each time securing the thread on the reverse of my card with a little bit of tape. Now that those threads are all in position, I can complete attaching the hearts. And you'll see the idea is that the 4 hearts dangle from that sentiment. Once I've decided exactly where I want the hearts to be positioned on the card, I'm going to snip off the excess thread, and I'll glue the thread onto the back of the heart, and then I'll stick the heart onto the card. And when they're all glued in position, that's how the card will look. I'm going to glue this onto a black base card, and I'm going to add a few more of the dots from the sticker set. And with that, my card is complete. For card 8, I'm using the hearts that I showed you earlier in the video. These are cut from one of the strips of paper. I've cut them all out, and I've covered them in glossy accents. And I'm going to put them aside to let them dry while I move on to the next part of the card. I'm using one of the tags, and I've taken the flower shape, and I'm using black StazOn ink to stamp Happy Birthday straight onto the plastic of that, I don't know what to call that, inset piece? That flower shape anyway. So now I'm using Peacock Feathers Distress ink to colour all over the outside of my tag. So I'm going to glue that piece into position, and then I'm going to get my glossy accent hearts back now that they're dry. So the hearts will be glued in place. They won't be free range, it won't be a shaker card. I want the bright colours of the hearts to show through the aperture. I had a couple of the little hearts left over, and I decided to glue them onto the front. Although I said this wasn't going to be a shaker card, I am actually going to add some shimmer and glimmer and movement with some confetti and some lawn fawn large glitter, and again I will post links to where you can get these under the video. Once I'm happy with the position of everything, I can glue down my tag. Shaky shake. This is another strip of paper that was cut from the sheet that had all of the strips on it. It's a piece that says Make a Wish, and I've cut it to size to fit onto the base of my tag, and I'm going to use a pink card with another of the sheets cut to size, slightly smaller than the base card, and that's where my tag will sit. Now I wanted ribbon to pop out at the top of the tag, but I didn't have anything in my stash that matched, so what I did was cut a strip of the paper that matches the sentiment below that says Make a Wish, and I've just glued that into position at the top of the tag, and my card is complete. For card 9, I'm cutting 3 pieces of paper 1 inch by 6 inches, and I'm going to use my scoring tool to score this at every 1/4 inch. If you don't have a scoring tool, you can measure the distance and put a pencil line through it so you know where you're going to fold. The scoring simply makes it easier to fold these. This is a small hole punch, it doesn't matter on the size. The important thing is to cut out a couple of little holes because we will use those in just a moment. Now you're going to fold the card backwards and forwards like a concertina, and when you've done each little section you can glue it to the next little section. So there's the 3 sections complete, and I'm going to glue the edges and just stick the lengths of paper together. Just hold it for a moment, just pinch it with your fingers, just hold it in position to make sure that it's stuck. And to make absolutely certain, I'm just going to squeeze it all together and just make sure it stays in place. I'll do the same with the final third piece. Once they're all glued together, we're going to close the circle by gluing the final pieces together as well. So now the circle is complete, I'm going to smush it down onto my mat and I'm going to drag it over to my pre-glued circle, because as you can see it makes it much easier if you've got a sticky surface ready to help you fix the rosette in place. I'm going to take the second circle and glue that up and put that on the top of my rosette. And now, to give it some time just to adhere, I'm going to place a pot of heavy glue on top of it. And when it's all finished, you can see it's quite robust. You can throw it around. It's quite sturdy. Now I have a piece of black card, and I'm going to take one of the sentiments from the set, and you can see I've put the piece that I cut earlier, Frosting Yum, I've put that across the top just to make it look a little bit different. I've white heat embossed my sentiments, and I'm going to cut my black card down to size. I'm going to cut some fishtails into the bottom of each of my pieces of black card, and then I'm going to take one of my stickers, another of the frosted buns, and I'm going to stick that right into the centre of my rosette. It's a perfect fit. I have some black base card, and I'm going to use a piece of the blue turquoise card to go on the top of that. And now I can position my rosette on the centre of my card with my two pieces of black card with their little sentiment hanging below it. To complete the card, I'm going to add a couple of the little dots and one of the hearts. For card 10, I'm going to use the blank strip, and I'm going to use two Versacolour inks. One is called turquoise and the other one is called pink. And I'm going to ink up the stamp, and I'm going to stamp it several times on a piece of plain white card. I'm also going to use the heart strip, and I'm going to do exactly the same and ink that up and print it several times. And now I'm going to take the stamp that reads Happy Birthday repeatedly, and I'm going to stamp that up with black archival ink, and I'm going to stamp it onto each of my coloured strips, and now I'm going to cut each of those out. So now we have a nice little bundle of strips, and I'm going to weave these together. So under, over, and then for the next strip you do the opposite, so it would be over, under, over, under. At this stage, don't worry too much about having the pieces in perfect line with each other, because you're going to end up moving them around when you put the card together anyway. So now I've found a sentiment that I want to fit just into the corner of where those strips meet, and I'm going to use my anti-static powder before I stamp on the sentiment, and then I'm going to white heat emboss it. That sentiment is going to become the anchor point for where those strips are positioned. So the most important strips that I want to glue down first are the two that abut the sentiment, so the one below it and the one to the left hand side of it. Those strips I'll fix in place first, and then once I'm happy with their position, I can build the rest of the weave around them. I'm just using a white piece of card to make sure that I don't get glue onto my mat. So that's the upright vertical piece just being glued into position, and as you can see, I've worked everything else back from that position. There are a few pieces that overhang, but I can use my scissors just to cut those off. And to complete the card, I'm going to add a little green heart, and that card is now finished. Now I'm going to leave you with some close-ups of all of the cards that we've made today with a little music. As always, thank you very much for watching, and if you haven't already, please subscribe. I'll see you next time.